Hi everyone, welcome back to Java 1 for All. In this video, we are going to talk about one of the, in my opinion, the most important concepts in object orientation, that is cohesion. So if I have to write it down for you, this is how you spell it. So cohesion is related to what a class is doing, to the purpose of that class. And when we are talking about object orientation, we are trying to achieve high cohesion. So high cohesion means that our class is doing only one thing. So the less things your class is doing, the better your cohesion. The highest cohesion will bring you a highly maintainable code that you probably won't have it breaking if you want to do changes in something that's totally unrelated to whatever your class was supposed to mean. So let me give you one example. Our class student right now is highly cohesive. For example, what's the purpose of student? The purpose of student here in the domain package is to represent a student, a real student, into our system. And if I give you one example about bad cohesion or low cohesion, would be, for example, imagine that I would like you to have a professor data, and I would like to have the same name, age, and gender for a specific professor. Well, a bad cohesion and someone that's not watching DevDojo could do something like this. You have name professor, you have age professor, and you have gender professor. So is this possible? Would this work? Yeah, definitely. This would definitely work. If I come back here to either student 1 or student 2 and I execute the class again, it will work without any problems. But what is the problem here? The problem is like we have two different things going on. Now, the purpose of student is kind of blurred. Are we supposed to represent student or are we supposed to represent professor? In real life, they are two different things. They are two different beings. We have student and we have professor. We do have a relationship between student and professor, but we are going to talk about that later. But even though this relationship is not supposed to be inside the same object, because right now, remember, the class is going to create objects. An object is an instance of a class. And with this instance, we are saying that they are the same thing. So if I create a new student now, even though I don't want this data related to professor, if I come here and I just put a breakpoint and Shift F9, you will see inside student that we do have professor data. And the problem relies on, for example, later, let's say I would like you to have the social number of the professor. We'll have to come here and add the social number, but the problem is, well, I'm adding the social number that usually student may not have, but the professor is probably almost for sure that they will have. So you are changing the class student to add something that's totally and primarily related to professor. So this is like low cohesion. This means that this class that was supposed to do only one thing is doing two things. Is acting as a student and also acting as a professor. And if you want to change something related to student, you are probably going to affect the professor as well, even though you don't want that. So that's why we are always trying to focus and get a high cohesion into our code because it's easy to maintain. Code is like a child that will never die. Once you deploy your code, once you have your code running, it will be there forever. It's not going to get old. Of course, there are some things that we say it's going to become deprecated or outdated, but in general, it can keep going and there without any changes forever if you don't turn off. So what we have to do in this case, well, basically just change how you are creating the object. Now, student is a student and professor is a professor. So I will do the following. I will come here to domain, new Java class, and I will create professor. And I will add this data, but now I'm going to remove the professor from the variables because it's clear that it's related to professor. I have professor and then I will have everything inside the professor object related to that professor. So name, age, gender, In this case, they are coming from the professor object, so I know that they are related to professor. Another example about bad coding, low cohesion, would be, for example, to add public static void main. Now, the class student is acting as something that's mapping the real world to our system, and also the one responsible for executing. So we don't have one purpose anymore. We have two purposes: represent the real world student and also execute this class student. So we have two things, and in the end, everything that I want to do to test will affect the whole class student. So it may be looking okay, but it's better. It's just one class, I can see. But well, when you are developing your own system, you have like 300, 400 classes. And believe me, if you change something in one class that's not supposed to be related to, let's say, the domain, the business rule, and that breaks something completely different, you are going to spend hours and maybe even days trying to fix that problem. So in my case here, since I have a highly cohesive, if I want to change something related to student, I don't have to worry about professor because, well, there is nothing in professor related to student. And it's the same thing. If I want to create a new test now for professor, I just come here, a new class, professor test 01, and I don't have to worry about student or the other tests because this test is only to test the professor class. And we know how it works. For example, how do we create objects? First, we need to create and import the reference variable. So we imported professor from this package. We have to give a name to that reference variable, and then we need to create a object. So professor, professor, new professor. Now we have a reference variable and also an object. And exactly the same way we did for student, we can give the names. So professor.name coming from Dragon Ball, professor.age probably is past 150, and professor.gender male. So I have my space in memory related to professor, and then I have all the attributes with some data, and I'm not giving the name, I'm not initializing and assigning at the time I'm creating the object anymore. And let's say that I would like to print everything in one line. How can we do it? You saw how to use the concatenation when you are inside the system out println. So you just have to add a plus, and technically you could just keep adding all the attributes, but if you do this, they will all come together. So Control Alt L to format your code, Control Shift F10. So basically you have all the data together, and it would be nice if we could give like one space in between. So I will just copy this and also add here. In this way, we will have a nice space in between the attributes. And if you want, you can even give something extra. For example, saying, hey, this is age and this is gender. And I can also give it here. For example, this is name. Control Alt L, Control Shift F10. And we have now everything in one line. So if you press enter, you will see that even though you are in a different line, it will still work. And that's because Java understands that you are continuing in the second line. It's looking for the semicolon. If you remove here, then you will have a compilation error. But when you are using the concatenation, it's just saying that, okay, just move on into the next line. Technically, it's the same thing here. You could also do this, but please don't. And also, maybe we should keep things like this for now. So I try to keep everything below, actually before this line right here. It's the default value coming from IntelliJ. You could change this. I think it's 120 or maybe 140 columns, but this is the default, and I think it's more than enough. Okay, guys, so I think that's everything that I wanted to tell you. See you in the next video. Bye.